Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Oregon Wine Symposium and the best session you're going to have. I'm super honored to be here today and super privileged to have two of the smartest people in global wine as our panelists to talk to you about direct-to-consumer engagement and strategies that will make that happen. So thank you for having us here today. I want to introduce my two friends. I want to introduce Paul Mabray, who, if you've done anything in DTC, you know Paul, I would hope, because A, he's been around for 2 decades, but B, he's also the most brilliant person that we're always chasing behind, trying to get up to speed on Paul's products. I've known him since back in the Inertia Beverage Group days, which if you're old enough to remember that group, but through Wine Direct, Wine.com, Vintank, most recently Emetree and Pix, he's just been a huge leader in building the bridge between technology, wine, and consumers. So Paul, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you for having me. Wish it was in person.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough that Paul introduced me to Polly Hammond. And Polly is currently in New Zealand. Polly is the managing director and founder of Five Forests, which is a digital marketing strategy company for wine. I love the story that Polly and her career journey, she went to USC and got 2 degrees in international relations and French. And that got her very, very involved and passionate about economic behavior. And so she has taken her whole career and taken it to wine and why consumers make rational or irrational decisions and why they end up purchasing wine. So she is brilliant. I've been fortunate to be working with her for a couple of years, and I'm excited that even from far, far away, Polly, that you're here to join us today.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here. Glad to be here with 2 of my favorite people in wine too. So high five for a good group.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of 11. Everybody, this is not your typical conversation where the panelists don't know each other. We've all worked together a lot. So our goal really is to share with you today things that you can take away, because I find nothing more frustrating than sitting through a seminar and don't leave with something tactical or inspiring that I can work on. And so we're hoping to bring that to you today, as well as just a broad range of specific winery examples of DTC work in the world of e-commerce that I've done at Brooks, and then what Polly and Paul have seen globally in the markets that they've worked in and with other clients. So with that, Polly, do you have something that you want to make sure everybody takes away?
Yeah, I'm pretty basic on I want everyone to walk away and have something they can do today that they can make a change, because there's no point all of us sitting around a table and speaking in theory. And my team will tell you, Paul knows this, that Brooks is a poster child, that if every client who walked through my door worked the same way that Brooks would, we would be very happy. So I would also like to set good examples for how to be good clients and get the most out of your teams.
Awesome. And Paul, what about you? What do you want people to take away?
Yeah, I'm not quite as much in the details. Obviously, we want to do the inspiration of like, this is the best time in history of wine for us to move forward. I mean, we're entering the golden age of wine as a result of this terrible black swan event called COVID. And the entire internet's awake to whether it's wineries or retailers or consumers, especially to buying wine online. And if we've ever had a time to invest in this channel, now is the time. And that's the key. We should start looking to the future, and we should have the permission to fail forward, because no one has the recipe or the answer exactly. What works for Brooks doesn't work for Donham. What works for Donham doesn't work for Maryvale. What works for Maryvale doesn't work for Dow and Paso Robles. They're all very different. So everyone has to carve their own path forward. And I know that we'll have little key anecdotes or we'll have examples, but there's a lot of failure that we have to do to find our recipe for success, to be really honest with you.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that we all share very much is the conversation about how it starts with the leadership of investing in marketing to actually have a true DTC and e-commerce strategy. And, as somebody who came into the industry 16 years ago without any knowledge of wine, I always looked at that process and thought, okay, it's 3 years from when you put your plants in the ground before you can get fruit. And then it's another at least 2 years in barrel, and then it's another year in bottle, and it might be another year before you recover your cash. But everyone's expectations of marketing are so much shorter than that. right? That you can put in a month's worth of work or a month's worth of pay or 6 months worth of pay, and you're expecting some great return. And there needs to be some patience and long-term investment, I think, from the leadership and backing it for an extended period of time to actually start seeing results in marketing. And I would love to hear what either of you feel about that, especially because you know what that timeline is better than anyone.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one, because one of the biggest problems that we've seen in the past 5 years, and very definitely in late 2020, is that a lot of wineries and other businesses have been sold this bill of goods around slap up a website, throw up some social media accounts, and they will come. And this is one of our challenges every day, because as you say, it doesn't work that way. As Paul says, we have to have permission to not do things right. I mean, a huge part of digital marketing is actually learning as you go. And we get bombarded by information every day. Something that works 3 months ago isn't going to work right now. So not only do you have to have sort of the team backing you, whether that's in-house or someone, an agency partner, but you also have to have the leadership's willingness to accept that not everything is going to perform. Some things are going to just absolutely skyrocket, but that is also anomalous. Mm-hmm. And I know that we've had to have conversations with you, Janie, where we're like, well, we tried that, but that didn't work. And we pulled that, within a week, because there was no point continuing with that budget. And being able to do that without fear of reprisal, I think, is very important, especially to in-house staff who often, especially in America, where I am not, do not feel comfortable if they have not performed at the best game of every minute. So
Jenny, I have a question for you. You've actually always been kind of an innovator. I mean, you were one of the first customers at Wine Direct way back when it was IBG. You've led that path, but your total adoption of the internet and digital, what made you change? Because you did it almost like a year or two right before COVID. So you're actually ahead of the curve again, but what made you mentally make that shift from, taste room DTC, wine club DTC and locality to like, I need to put my money and time into digital as a leader? I think that would help other people see that psychological shift.
Yeah. I mean, my first 10 years with the winery, we were almost completely reliant on distribution and on the 3-tier system, which was great. I mean, it gave us enough cash flow. It really helped develop the brand across the country nationally. We built a new building in 2014, and that drastically changed our tasting room model, and that grew very well for us as a business. But because of the way we offer those services, it's all tableside service. It's very intensive. There's a lot of overhead. And so where I kind of got to is, what's my next strategy in diversity? And it's, e-commerce, because after I have a great website, sure, I'm going to have some other investment, and I've learned a lot about what that investment is going to mean, but you don't necessarily have the staffing overhead and the scheduling people issues necessarily. And so I wanted to grow that. And I had been on the IBG platform that, morphed into so many different things for, 14 years or something. And thought, what, it's time for someone to take a really good analytical look at the performance of our website, not just from an SEO standpoint, but from a content standpoint, and give me some fresh ideas. And so that's how I met Polly, through you. And after a 1.5-year long process, we were fortunate enough to launch a new website for e-commerce, which I will say that I try not to do things. I try to look outside of the wine industry when I'm looking for inspiration and strategy. And, there's so many amazing e-commerce platforms out there. And I really wanted to find the best e-commerce platform for wine. And wine's more complicated because of all the, restrictions and whatnot for shipping and compliance. But I knew that there would be something out there. And so that was part of it too, I want to find the cutting edge. And I mean, knock on wood, I feel like our timing couldn't have been better with finding Five Forests, getting our new website we launched last February.
So talk to me about, I'm sorry to keep pressing you, but talk to me about that process, because that's a big part of the transition, that I know that Polly's really keen on, that is she does a process where she does discovery first. So maybe you guys can talk about that, because I think that's important. People just jump and not look at how do we figure out what's terra firma.
Yeah, well, and you know what I thought was amazing, and Polly, honestly, kudos to you, because I love to learn and I'm an avid learner, but I feel like, we have a website, we have content. We spent hours together on Zoom on the phone. I felt like Polly had a really good grasp of our brand, but when we decided to make the decision to go forward with a new website, she said, well, okay, I need to come do a discovery. And I'm like, what's a discovery? And she's like, well, I need to come spend 3 days with you on site, meet your team, get a feel, like really understand you and your business. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. So she came out, and it was great, because where we ended was so specific to Brooks and who we are, but what we were missing and what we really needed. And what it really came down to was, when you're present and you're with our team and you're with our people and you're on our site, there's an experience and there's emotion invoked, and it feels really good. So how do we translate that into a website and into our communications, whether it be weekly emails, social media? And that was really all prompting, not to mention an amazing report that I will have forever that we still use a year and a half later, to remind us of what those learnings were. And that was a great process.
Interruption. She's not going to have that report for much longer, because the part of digital that we're going to come to at the end of this is a year later, we're getting ready to completely rewrite that report. So, to where this is all going, it never ends. There we go.
Yeah.
We're good.
The only constant is change on the internet. I think that's something that we understand. It's always a developing, evolving process, right? So that's the hard part about investing in the internet, isn't it, Janie and Polly? It's not one and done. It's not a single thing. It's like a house that you're continually upgrading and adjusting and fixing. And as the more traffic that comes through the house, the more often you have to update it and adjust it and figure it out. And I think that we treat websites and the internet like a project. And once it's done, we wipe our hands and we expect it to be done. It's not. It's a forever living, breathing entity, just like your tasting room.
Well, and then you layer on top of that something like COVID, and you're having to maintain your messaging and change your messaging, and change a lot about your strategy that you weren't anticipating. So just the routine maintenance on a regular basis isn't enough.
Right.
Yeah. So, I think just going back to the discovery, and to talk a little bit about how that extrapolates into your digital properties, because this is something that we bandy about a lot in wine. We all hear tell a story. People love stories, but we have this problem with getting really precise on what the story is. And Brooks has an amazing story. And I know that is a space that the winery just automatically stands out. But before you put, a pencil to paper, you actually need to get very clear on what you're offering, whom you're offering it to, and how you're communicating that. And something that we were able to do with Janie, that in light of COVID, I'm so grateful for, and we only get this with about one client a year. We did, I want to say, 6 months of digital discovery before we ever built a new site for Janie. And so we had this wealth of information about who was interacting with the brand, where were they coming from, everything. So to get into real nitty gritties, not only were we dealing with some highly specific Google Analytics, but we were running heat maps. I remember, Janie, you and I going through that, what were we learning from it? And as we got the site online, we were literally watching real recordings of how people were engaging with the site. So what it meant was that when March hit, and here we are, we've put all this effort into what's the messaging and who is the audience, and we were prepared. And there was, and this is something I do want to talk about. It also is this notion of what I'm going to describe as, like, one-click websites. I'm going to slap up a Squarespace, or I'm going to do a Wix or something like that. If you're in a jam, which there are a lot of people who were in March and April, who are like, just give me some way to sell, fine. That's a immediate solution to an emergency problem. But that is not the way that you create a resilient platform that continues to sell month on month, despite the changes in the world. So again, this comes back to leadership. When we went to Janie and said, well, we're going to need to create some custom development. We're going to have to create apps and solutions that don't exist anywhere in the world right now so that we can solve this problem for you and the many things, because that's another thing. Janie's got a lot of stuff that comes into her digital. She's got a big team that actually handles a lot of her marketing on site. So we had to work really collaboratively, both in terms of our human interactions, but also our digital integrations. And, good honor for the willingness to do that.
Well, and I think too, Polly, like one of the things I've really learned with working with you all is, sure, a website, there's a lot to it that's about marketing, right? Your messaging, what it looks like, your photos, all that stuff. But the background of the programming and that digital forensics that you guys do on a regular basis is not anything that I had experienced before. And it makes a world of difference. The way that you'll change my homepage and change my shop page to respond to what you're seeing traffic wise on a regular basis. And that's just something that I think people don't necessarily think about when they're searching for a new marketing company, is really making sure that that technical sophistication is part of the product.
For sure. I mean, you definitely need that agility to look forward. And what was the scariest part about it, Janie, as you're going through that big transformation? So for other Oregon wineries, I mean, what was the part that made you kind of go,
I don't know. There wasn't that much that was scary, actually. It felt so good. It felt so fresh, to have something new after so long.
Right.
Because part of the process too changed my messaging. And, Polly, you touched on the fact that we have a great story, and we do have a great story. That story is about our legacy. And I will never forget telling you across the table, you're like, Janie, tell me your story. So I start doing what I call my vomit, the same way I've told my story for 16 years. And you stopped me in the middle of it and you said, that's all great, but right now, you're the only winery in the world to be B Corp certified, a member of 1% for the Planet, and Demeter certified. Boom. That's where you start. That's where you end. That's your messaging. And I was like, wow. And it was a lot for me. That was probably what was scary. I had to change the way that I told my story and the security of what I've always leaned into about who we are and what we do and why we do it, and to really rethink that. And nobody had ever pushed me to do that.
It's tough. I mean, everyone's saying they're family owned, they're sustainable, they're organic. The stories are repetitive. I actually did an exercise on Twitter the other day. I said, if someone could sell me their wine in a tweet, I would buy wine from them. And you'd be surprised at how challenging that was to get through, and how few people were able to articulate something that would convince me about me buying the wine. This is going to light your world on fire. This is the best Syrah that you ever take. None of those things came out. What was good for me was it was a family owned. We had a passion for making wine, and I'm like, that's not the value exchange I'm looking for. I'm sure Polly saw that Twitter stream for a while.
I did see that. And I do think that notion of value exchange is a big challenge that we have in the digital space, because if I could figure out how to make somebody taste wine through a screen, I would be a gazillionaire. We always struggle with that because we have a product and it's in a bottle, and it really, there are a lot of people in wine who think that the juice in the bottle is the most important thing that we do, and that marketing is anathema. And that if I am trying to market everything that's on the outside of the bottle, does that perforce mean that what is inside the bottle is not good? And our perspective on it is, what's inside the bottle is your very base promise. Like that is essential, and it has to be good. But to be fair, there are a lot of good wines out there. Mm-hmm. And it's not even how you communicate to or at, it's how you communicate with your audiences. And that's something like, if we look at Brooks and if we look at leadership and implementation, digital has always been seen as part of a conversation with, not a shouting at. And that's a huge difference from so many of the wineries that we see. So, I mean, a great thing to talk about is the level of collaboration that has to happen. My team is entirely remote right? So I've got copywriters here and in Europe who are working on Janie's stuff. We've got the developer in Canada. You know, everybody knows Mike, my business partner, who's working on Janie's stuff. I'm in New Zealand, and then she has her team. So there's a lot of different pieces that have to come together and have to be, you know, like have to be really patient with one another. And we can talk about just the amount of internal communication that goes on between our team and the Brooks team. It's constant. So I do think that notion of we're not bolted on, you know, digital marketing isn't bolted on. You're actually really a part of the team, no matter where you're situated geographically from them.
Yeah, super fluid for sure. Yeah. What about measurement? You know, that is obviously when you're making the type of investment that you have to make, I think, to really have a successful DTC program, which for us this year, it was about 8% of our DTC revenue, a little over 8%, which I remember seeing those percentages and thinking there's no way I'm ever going to do that, but it obviously brings the returns. What have you guys seen that is important for wineries to look at when they're looking for measurement, or how do they measure that ROI when they're going to make that investment, whether it be a new website or into a new piece of software?
Go ahead and start, Polly, and then I've got lots of thoughts after that.
I know you do. Okay. So I think that I've got two answers in very Libran balanced way. So the first one is, if any marketer ever comes to you and gives you a guarantee, just like go screaming for the hills, because that's not how digital marketing works. That's just complete BS. But what they do need to tell you is, what are your goals and how are they going to measure it? Because you have to have that in place before you spend a single penny. And I can't tell you how many projects we get into that in some cases are decades old, who have no good measurables. And this is a problem for everyone in the system, because someone like me can't sit in a room once a month and explain, here's where your money's gone. And then if you're working in-house, you can't actually justify continued spend or growth or iteration or any of that. So you have to start with, what are your real goals? These are not the fluffy goals that often we will hear in business. Like, really, I want your financial goals, or I want your brand awareness numbers. I want it to be measurable. I want to know how we're going to measure it. And then you have to find the ways that you'll do that. So, that's when I talk about, like, the foundations have to be good. You know, that's your foundation. That is the purpose of a website. It is, or your social media, or your paid online advertising. That is a form of frontage between you and the audience, and the ability to understand how what we're doing is working means that we can have that better relationship with them. The shiny skin, which is all the pretty stuff, you know, the pictures and the user interface, whatever you want to call it, that needs to come way, way, way down the track. And then, you know, in terms of measurables, it can be anything. You know, it can be so we do a lot of remarketing for clients. So what do those numbers look like? What kind of ads are you running? What is the purpose of the ad that you're running? That's a really big thing. What platforms are appropriate? How do you work many platforms efficiently? Is, you know, that's an actual spend. That's the investment on doing it. I know one of the things that we did, Janie, for you, when we sat down, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, something like that, was we laid out, based on your goals and the way that you like to communicate, we laid out a full flow chart of how content gets rolled out. So what's the keystone content, and then the multi uses of that, and then made certain that we had an ability to measure the uptake of all of those. So that's very specific to Brooks and to wine. Paul.
Yeah, no, I think you have to break it out kind of into two key buckets, to your point. One is almost like a CapEx, which is like what you're spending to develop your infrastructure, right? What is that? The website, the backend stuff. And you to Polly's, shave away the prettiness to make it functional. And I'm going to assume that you're trying to make e-commerce sales in this this conversation, that you're not trying to do a branding marketing exercise. The good news about DTC and e-commerce is it's very measurable. You can see what's working or not. On the other side is the operational overhead costs that are really tied to, kind of 3 KPIs that are key performance indicators for me, which is, what's my customer acquisition cost? How much am I spending for retention? And what's the lifetime value of my customers by cohort, right? I'm trying to segment them so I can understand them better. If you can get some good, healthy measurements across those 3, you can really understand the health of your business. Too many of us are trying to not spend money on customer acquisition costs. Too many of us are not trying to budget for customer retention. And it's a byproduct of the way that we've seen direct to consumer in the past, which is we thought we could achieve all of the suggested retail price in our pocket. That's not a healthy model about investing into getting your customers new and retaining them over a long time. And I mean to speak to this really intentionally because we've been spoiled in most wine regions that we're very fortunate through eno-tourism that we don't actually focus on retention as much as I think we need to. It's probably the retention, as we found in COVID, is the new acquisition. If we build a bit better mousetrap of keeping our customers, the dollars that we spend to acquire them are better investments than they were, instead of having to spend money that just comes out of sieve, essentially, of water, and you're just pouring customer out the other end. So focusing on that good retention model, trying to achieve a longer lifetime value is so much more important right now as you're getting ready to spend that next dollar. Get that honed in first and then go chase new customers. I can't say that enough. We focus so much on the net new customer that it's just we're on a rat race. We're on one of those wheels going over and over again, and it's not healthy business.
Can I jump in on that with relation to Janie and Brooks? So when I say that Brooks is a poster child, Janie does some things that very few of our clients do. So when the seasons change and we go to her and we're like, Janie, we need new photos. We need new videos. We need you to video your club members. We need this. There's no hesitation to do that. So, Janie, who is terrific on the customer retention because they have built such a loyal following, but we have to remember it's not just money expense, it's time expense. And yes. I know how many hours Janie puts into communicating with longtime customers, building those relationships. She's got incredible credibility in the industry. And we have to look at all of this as the elements of customer acquisition and customer retention. So absolutely, you cannot try to silo off the work that happens in digital with the work that happens in the tasting room, with the work that Janie's doing at home on a Sunday night at 9:00. And I do think, and I also think, I mean, just to completely veer off course, I think that this is a problem that wine has in our pricing model, because so many independent wineries never factor in the cost of what an individual proprietor or a winemaker owner, what they do for the work. They don't have that as part of their margins. And that means that as the world shifts, they cannot actually afford to invest in improvement or in innovation or, in a photographer.
Yeah. One of the things that really struck me when was that part of, how are we going to express this authenticity and great experience and realism through the website and then through communications. And it was right when COVID hit. And I know so many of us that are listening to this felt the same way. I got more emails from wineries offering a discounted wine that didn't acknowledge that there was a global pandemic happening, that didn't have 1 ounce of personalization to them. And I got so frustrated that kind of inspired me to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to start my weekly emails right now. And the first one is going to be titled, "This is not your typical winery email during COVID." And ever since then, I spend, I don't know, 3 to 4 hours a week drafting an email that I send out once a week. I put my cell phone number in it. I put my email in it. I hear back from people all the time. I've gotten better open rates. I sell a lot of wines on those days. I've never had to discount the wines. And I'm building a community that's like, because it's so human for all of us, it's so real. And the fact that I don't see enough people in our industry acknowledging that and that they're just looking to move product, I don't think any of us like to get those emails, really.
Let's be really honest. There's no real advantage to buy from a winery. There's no selection advantage. There's no efficiency advantage. There's no price advantages if if you have wines in the market. So there's only really two reasons to buy from a winery. One is products you can't get anywhere else, and an emotional connection to that brand. And that brand, that's community in its essence, right? So that's what you're saying. And that's what a lot of digitally native vertical brands are. That's what they're doing. They're creating a community of like-minded people, whether it's Allbirds or Warby Parker Glasses, or you can go on and on of these different really amazing brands that are creating a culture around their products. And you want to be part of that. Peloton, is a great example.
Well, I think that we can really talk about that in the context of Brooks, because one of the early messaging decisions is that unless we are specifically selling a product, we don't use product pictures. It's always been about how do we just immerse people in the experience of Brooks, and the wine is a tiny, tiny portion of that. And so when when I go in and I do audits, and what I see are just walls and walls of pack shots and bottle shots, I just kind of want to give them a big hug and say, come on, let's get some pictures of people. It's the best investment that you can make, is just to show your beautiful product in light of all of the experiences. And Lord knows we have had them in 2020. And the wineries that were doing well were acknowledging what was going on with people, what was going on with their own people. And I think that we can't discuss the benefit of digital without talking about how wineries who had strong digital strategies were actually able to do better for their teams, for their staff, for their community during the past year. It's just, and I don't want to be a doom and gloomer, but we have no idea what the next year is going to look like.
That's the thing. We don't know what any of the next year is going to be like. I mean, this year, you think it was bad, pandemic was one thing, but we were double hit in Oregon and California with fires, pandemic. And let's not mention it was a crazy year in the election cycle, plus. I mean, it's been a kooky year in 2020. Yeah. I'm glad to have it in my rearview mirror. And 2021 doesn't look like it's letting up on us yet. The 30-day warranty hasn't been great for us so far. So, COVID rollout, the immunization rollout hasn't been exactly a smooth management.
So, I mean, I would ask Janie to share with us. Janie, you have been able to do a lot of good for your community and for the organizations whom you partner with. And I think that it's important to talk about that, because if a winery, if an owner, if a leader can't get behind it because the tech is intimidating, can we get them behind it because the results are profound? So Janie, you want to tell me a little bit about what you've been able to do this year?
With Beyond Brooks, is that specifically what you're referring to?
Beyond Brooks, with the giving, with Wine Unify, with the Growers Relief Fund.
Yeah, I mean, that's been one of the hard things. And, Paul, you mentioned a lot about acquisition. We're in a hole right now, right? We're not out seeing people. We're not out doing tastings. We're not out doing wine dinners. Virtual tastings are a thing. We've been doing a lot of them. But whether or not that's actually driving, new customers, or it's a one and done, I think is still a little yet to be seen. But there's ways to support each other. So we did a couple of things, or we've done a lot of things this last year. One of my favorites is we started a CSA at Brooks, because guess what? My local farmer had nowhere to take his vegetables because all of the restaurants were closed in Portland. And so we partnered to put together a CSA for our wine club members that was super successful. So that helped the farmer. It was an added value benefit that we gave to our wine club members. We stayed open a couple hours late on those days, so people who worked could come by until 7 o'clock at night. We've pretty much tried to tie a lot of the things we've done to, from a sales standpoint, instead of discounting the wines, we're giving some sort of charitable donation. So we've done stuff with the United Psalm Foundation, with the Independent Restaurant Coalition, with Wine Unify, with Assemblage, which is a local organization, Southern Smoke, really just to be able to give back. And that's on top of what we do with 1% of the planet for the planet. But people align with those causes and they feel good about giving. Our growers relief fund was a function of the fires up here. It was really, really difficult. And I made a decision pretty early that, we didn't have a lot of data. We just didn't have a lot of information and clearly no experience in the Willamette Valley with the fires. But what I wanted to do was take care of my growers. Like, at the end of the day, my whole deal is I have a legacy to continue, and our grower relationships are keystone to our production and who we are. And, we found none of them have crop insurance. Well, a couple did, but they were also from California. So they'd been there, done that, knew to be protected. But most of the Oregon growers didn't. And so we put together packages that varied by grower for not only some amount of money to retain our contract and to try to help them out, because we didn't take a lot of the fruit, but also for every bottle we've sold in the tasting room of one of their wines from a previous vintage, because we have a very strong single vineyard program, they're getting a portion of those proceeds. And those are going directly back to the grower, and trying to get them as whole as we possibly can. And, I had one farmer who's a customer on our mailing list, farmer in Illinois, send me $1,000 and say, I just want to give to your grower relief fund. I've had 2 people do that actually now, not buy wine. Wow. They just want to give and help take care of our growers. And, they're human beings too. They didn't know what would happen with the fires. A lot of them now are getting crop insurance, even though we hope it's never going to happen here again. But I think, that just goes back to how I felt at the beginning of COVID. Like, everybody's human here, right? I have more friends right now without jobs. I have customers without jobs. We have wine club members who have lost their jobs. A lot of people who are struggling. And if we can do something and use our business to help support other people, I think we should. We've done that with Beyond Brooks too. We've supported other companies. Why not partner with somebody in the kombucha industry and cross-market an event together to each other's mailing lists?
But you couldn't do that without digital in the same way, right? I mean, you're able to extend and touch people in their homes differently as a result of digital.
What I love about our Beyond Brooks program, which is this partnership we're doing with 9 different companies, is we get on the chat at the beginning of the event and say, where's everybody at? There's almost nobody from Oregon. They're all over the country, and it's the best feeling.
That's the key. I mean, the internet allows you access to cross distance, time, language, culture. It's a pretty amazing. So I know we're supposed to go on.
Can I just say something about that also we haven't touched on that I think is an important takeaway? And I hope the background noise of the leaf blower is not too bad for anyone. So someone let me know if it is that we have, so when all of this started in February, we had a plan of action. We had campaigns set out. We had a strategy. We knew what was going to be happening. That had to shift. And digital allows you to change in the moment. It is so adaptable. And that has been huge for the work that we've done with wineries like Brooks. The fact that, you know what, I will tell a story of, I think it was a Wednesday, and we get a multi-page email. Everybody on the thing gets a multi-page email from Janie saying, we're about to launch this whole entire thing, and we need it up by Monday. And there is a moment of panic when you do that, but we could. And we got it up on Monday, and the train kept going. Like that's something where when you look at, you have to have campaigns, you have to have cohesive efforts, you have to have strategy, but you also get a flexibility that old school marketing just didn't afford you. And again, this is about adapting and being resilient.
Well, and this, hopefully this example isn't going to apply in the future, but I think lessons learned from it. When we were able to reopen, we came up with our plan, what all our safety procedures were going to be, what our offerings were going to look like. And then I hosted on Zoom a couple of focus groups with our locals that are the most frequent customers and told them about the changes. And I got some good feedback that made us change a few things before they came. But then I did a soft opening and I had them come out. I had the photographer come out. And we had all these photos before we launched and opened that we used in our digital ad campaign, that we used on our website, that were used by Travel Oregon. I mean, just across the board. But it's that coordination and timing and having all of those channels working together so that when you are ready to launch something like that, it's broad.
That you said something that's almost equally more important, which is that feedback loop from the customer is something that most wineries, I mean, calling and speaking with your customer, doing that Zoom taste to say, does this work for you? And asking them the questions is, I know that doesn't sound very cutting edge, but if you look at the amount of wineries that don't ask their customers, do you like this? What would you like? How do you like why are you quitting our wine club? And what would you wish the wine club would be like is a key. I mean, being customer centric is something that we need to really adjust to in the wine industry quite significantly. It's a big change.
And understanding that digital is that conversation, because I can't tell you how many of our clients are not actually paying attention to the comments that are coming in through their own channels, that it's not just that they're never reaching out to someone, it's that they're just not even hearing it unless it's done in a format that is very direct to them. And or DMs or, but just basic people commenting on your Instagram post, go in and give them a high five and say thank you and share their stories in your stories, just accept that this wall, and this is 2020, this screen wall doesn't exist anymore. And we can't perpetuate that.
I see so many great examples about wineries doing labels on Instagram to see which one the customers like better. Or I saw a tequila truck they mocked up 5 different trucks they were going to do around the country. And the one that got the most votes, which was by thousands of people engaging with this brand, they'd made a decision on that. It's pretty amazing the amount of engagement that you can get and giving you the right kind of marketing information so that you can make a data-informed
or decision. Naming a dog, which is what Brooks is doing this month.
What's that?
Or doing a wine club testimonial video, which we did too.
Doing testimonial video.
All on Zoom. It was all done on Zoom.
And you know what? That points out, and that is so important. When you have an audience that has been built because they are accustomed to that feedback loop, they are willing to help. Janie needed people for videos, and they were like, sure, we're going to do it, because that conversation has been so prevalent for so long. And I don't know a lot of wineries who could just get on the phone in a day and come up with a dozen people who were willing to record a video for them.
So let me ask a question, because I know we're getting onto time. Like, what do you both feel as the progression that lays? So Jane, you made a progression from not, having a toe into digital to being digital. How do you feel that progression should go, Polly, and then Janie, and then we'll close maybe on that? Like, because I think people are looking, they don't know where to start with digital. It feels very large. It's like eating an elephant one bite at a time, but they don't know where to start. The leg, the tail, the ear, the nose, So what do you guys think?
That's a big question for the last 5 minutes.
Thank you. Close strong.
Where do I'm going to use Brooks and where we are right now with Brooks as my example. The point is, it's just always going. We're a year in with the website, and our team is currently rewriting the messaging, something that Janie hasn't even heard yet. Coming up pretty soon, we're probably going to go in and rebuild the entire website from scratch, because technology has improved in a year. It is about iteration. It's about watching what's happening in consumer trends, in wine trends, and it's about responding. So a lot of it is just accepting that this never ends.
I like that one. Janie?
Yeah, it never does. But I do think, I think individual wineries, everybody's in such a different position. So you might be a completely different size. You might have different objectives. Like, there might not be people that really want, to have the bells and whistles like a Commerce 7 has, for e-commerce. And so I think understanding what you really want and finding the things that then match that in terms of a website are super important. And if you have the people to maintain it and the budget to maintain it. And then when you get into all the content pieces I was overwhelmed when Polly gave me the list, and, it's your blog, and it's your EDMs, and it's your social media, and it's your YouTube, and I'm like, I don't have YouTube. I don't know. You pick what you're good at. You pick your low hanging fruit first, and you start there, and you develop that, and you find where you have the best results. And then you can add those other things in. I don't think you don't have to necessarily start global. It'll be the best when you can get across all of those different mediums and have a coordinated campaign, but you can start with a couple of pieces.
That's a
To
great
use
piece.
Paul's favorite expression, nail and scale. Do not try to do all of it. Do what you can well and grow into more as time and budget and knowledge allows.
Yeah,
And
that,
definitely
and
Dr.
that, and I would
Seuss.
say keep it human and keep it real. I mean, there are people behind every brand, and I think the way that we connect as human beings shouldn't be any different than trying to sell our product. I mean, I always have believed that if you give people a good experience, the sale is going to come. Maybe it doesn't come that day, but they had such an amazing experience, they come back the next time with their friends. We've seen that with our digital events too. So I think that's important, especially at this time and always.
I think that's a great lead, and I agree with you both. I think it's really much more simple. Everyone always tries to look at the technology as the solution. I think it starts with the people. It started with you first, Janie. It starts with your staff. It starts with Polly coming in and helping. You hired a professional, right? You brought in Polly to do that. So people are a key component of that. And then it's about process. What are the things that we're trying to adjust? What's the journey we want to take our customers on? None of that has technology. There's an e-commerce. There's no email. You're actually going backwards to the foundational pieces, and then you layer on the programs. And whether it's Commerce 7 or whatever you do, those are the scaling tools. And always with the simple culture of this agility culture and this culture of experimentation, because the world is changing around us continuously. Whether that's Clubhouse is the new voice, nerdy social network, or next week it's going to be virtual reality, or it's going to be, Alexa. Who knows what's happening next? But the only constant in the world is change, and the only way we can adapt to it is that continual agility and experimentation.
And that goes right back to our beginning conversation, which all starts with the leadership and having the supportive leadership and the vision to make it happen.
No question. Kudos to you for that, by the way. Again, Janie.
Well, I mean, it's what we all need to do. And I hope that we see more and more people in the industry doing it on a scale that makes sense, because there's a lot of consumers out there that want to be touched and they can't physically anymore, for sure.
We needed to touch them anyways. The reality that the tasting room model was a very brittle and not scalable model on its own. I think the realization is something that's happened because of the both COVID and the fires. But the reality is we needed to find another way to get to consumers.
Yeah.
And if you look at their footprint, most wineries have most of their consumers within a 90-mile radius. And that's not where we're going to be sustainable. It's we're selling their wine to them when they're in Boston or in Austin, in South Beach, Florida, or New York City.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you. It was a great conversation. Thank you for leading. You're doing such a great job, Janie, where I'm like so proud of the way you guys are really taking it to the next level. It's amazing.
Well, we're trying. But it'll be great when this is live. We'll be there at the tail end. We'll be there throughout for questions. None of you will know that until you hear this very end part, but I look forward to the interaction, and I hope there's a lot of it, and look forward to seeing the two of you back. And thank you again to the symposium, which is by far one of the best wine events in the country every year. So it's an honor to be here.
I'm so glad to be coming from remote. Thank you. And to be on a panel with two of my favorite people. Thank you for having me.
And when I see you guys in person, I'm going to hug you like a weirdo because, COVID. So you guys are going to be like, stop hugging me, but I'm going to hug you a lot. So nice to see you both. Thank you.
You too. All right.
Thank you.